Kia ora, g'day, welcome back here with a paid reaction request from one of the kind supporters over in the UK who's asked me to react to this Oxford debate on Queen and country. And so here we have Ben Sullivan. We will not fight for Queen and country. So let's jump into this first part. There's several videos, so bear with me as we go through these.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Firstly, I would like to apologise for the state of my voice, although the President has assured me that I sound more manly and husky than usual, and so I hope that this will make up for any brief pauses or repetitions. I am sure you are all aware that we are gathered here tonight to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the most famous debate the Union has ever held. In 1933, after a fierce debate in front of a packed chamber, the Union shocked respectable society by carrying the motion this House would under no circumstances fight for king and country by 275 votes to 153. Standing in my position 80 years ago tonight was Kenham Digby, St John's College, whose great-nephew Piers we are fortunate enough to have with us in the audience tonight.
I'll just say, I've not, like most of my reactions, about 99 point whatever percent of them I've not seen before, but I know nothing about this debate in terms of how long it's been going on for, so this is all news to me.
In the aftermath of the debate, the ISIS wrote of Digby that he had a thub-tumping style of oratory which would be more appreciated in Hyde Park than in the Union. I hope I may receive a slightly kinder epithet. Firstly, though, as the opening speaker, it falls upon me to introduce our guests tonight. Speaking alongside me for the proposition, we have firstly Ben Griffin, former SAS.
Those guys looked very unimpressed in terms of what they're listening to so far.
SAS trooper and founder of Veterans for Peace UK. Mr. Griffin fought in Iraq, but refused to return for a second tour, citing the brutality of US soldiers against Iraqi civilians.
That was one of the reasons why I've been sent this as well. I have done other reactions to Ben Griffin in the past, and I was made aware that Ben Griffin is sitting on the side of we will not fight for Queen and country, or whatever the term is, I think.
Expecting to be court-martialed, he was instead released as his commanding officer heaped praise upon him for his skill and bravery. To round up our case is Mr. Gareth Porter, one of the most prominent anti-war activists in the United States. Mr. Porter is a journalist and historian who has been active in opposing Western military intervention since the Vietnam War. In 2012, Mr. Porter received the Martha Gellhorn Prize for Investigative Journalism, which in 2011, sorry.
I guess they're sitting there wondering, are you going to get to the point and talk about why you're actually not going to fight for Queen and country, or are you just going to continue talking about your husky voice and introducing your colleagues? I'm sure he's going to get to it soon.
Was awarded to another one of the Union's more recent guests, Julian Assange. To begin the case for side proposition, we are joined by the MP for Penrith and the Border, Mr. Rory Stewart. It is not overly surprising to find Mr. Stewart sitting on the opposition bench this evening, as he has been employed by Her Majesty the Queen in no less than 4 different capacities: as an MP, as a former reserve soldier, as a diplomat serving in Iraq, and as a summer tutor to her grandsons, Princes William and Harry. Mr. Stewart has also written
well, at least he smiled there.
several books, including one about his 30-day solo walk across Afghanistan and another about his time working for the Coalition Provisional Authority in Iraq, where he was in charge of a compound during its siege by Sadrist militia. Following him will be Count Nikolai Tolstoy, head of the Constitutional Monarchy Association and distant relation of Leo. In between writing extensively on the forced repatriation of Russians after World War II, Count Tolstoy has also found time.
Geez, he looks like he looks like he's just sucking on a lemon, that fella.
To stand as the UKIP parliamentary candidate for Witney, opposing David Cameron in 2010. To round up the debate, we have none other than Sir Malcolm Rifkind, the Member of Parliament for Kensington. Sir Malcolm is the current chairman of the Intelligence and Security Committee and served as both Defence and Foreign Secretaries under John Major. His glittering career...
Chairman of Intelligence and Security Committee, eh? Jeez.
Career reached an all-time high, however, last term when he was invited to speak at the Christchurch History Society, where I found out firsthand how uncannily like Sean Connery he really does sound. We thank him again for returning.
Well, at least he smiled. So two of these fellas on this side who I think are speaking on behalf of they will fight for Queen and country. At least a couple of them have smiled.
To Oxford. Madam President, these are your guest speakers, and they are most welcome. Now on to my speech. This evening I have 2 points. Firstly, how the illusionary nature of Queen and country makes us fight for the wrong reasons, because the concept of Queen and country is not substantive. It means nothing. Secondly, what is particularly pernicious and insidious about fighting under the banner of Queen and country?
This fella's already said a whole bunch of words, pernicious and blink and whatever some of the other words were that he was saying as what appears now to be part of the intro before now he's getting into his part of the debate, I guess. Interesting that this debate has gone on. I guess initial thoughts for me is like we deploy in a way. There was never talk of for the Prime Minister, for the Queen or anything like that. Although that's probably likely just part of the implied nature of what it is that you're doing when you're part of or when you're in a country like New Zealand or Australia. And we do fall under that monarchy piece in terms of the UK. I don't know the exact details or what that structure and how all of that plays out, but I know that we do have a level of respect for the royals over there in the UK. So I guess inherently and as part of that, if you're deploying on operations, that's who you're representing, that's who you're fighting for. But I guess where I'm going with it is that I never personally don't recall ever saying those words out loud. I don't recall ever hearing any of the boys saying, yeah, we're doing this for Queen and country and all that sort of stuff, or yeah, we're doing this for Australia or whatever. But anyway.
Now onto my definition. I am neither a Republican nor a pacifist. This debate is not whether or not the monarchy is on balance beneficial. And I do believe that there are some circumstances when military intervention is justified. Ladies and gentlemen, all we are saying on side proposition is that under no circumstances should the idea of Queen, should the idea of country be a consideration in the decision to go to war. It should not be a consideration for the soldier on the ground, the politician in the cabinet, or for the voter at the ballot box. On to my first point, that the conception of Queen and country does not involve fighting for anything substantive. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the monarchy? I am not doubting that our Queen has an extremely impressive record of public service, and that she plays a very important role in both our cultural and constitutional structure and heritage. However, the monarchy today seems increasingly difficult to fight for. Here are a few quotations from Prince Philip, some humorous, some not so much. Quote, "So, who's on drugs here? He looks like he's on drugs," to a 14-year-old member of a Bangladeshi youth club in 2002.
Is that what he said? I'm assuming he's quoting these, in terms of what has actually been said by him.
Quote, "And what exotic part of the world do you come from?" asked in 1999 of Tory politician Lloyd Taylor of Warwick, whose parents are Jamaican. He replied, quote, "Birmingham," unquote. But also, and less humorously, quote, "People usually say that after a fire, it is water damage that is the worst. We are still drying out Windsor Castle," unquote, to survivors of the Lockerbie bombings in 1993. Or, quote, "If a cricketer, for instance, suddenly decides to go into a school and batter a lot of people to death with a cricket bat, which he could do very easily, I mean, are you going to ban cricket bats?" unquote, in a Radio 4 interview shortly after the Dunblane shootings in 1996. The point of this is not for me to go Prince Philip bashing. It is to show that royals are just people. They can be honorable, they can be boring, they can be sensitive, and they can be ignorant. And bear that point in mind. Now on to country. When we think about Britain, we don't think about suburbs and unemployment, semi-detached houses and our local schools. What Britain is really like. We have this romantic conception of rolling hills, afternoon tea, and beautiful country houses. Ladies and gentlemen,
Probably, I don't know if you'd get that response from most Kiwis or Aussies. I'm taking a stab here, just in terms of picturing the UK in general. If that's what he was talking about, I never pictured rolling hills or afternoon teas. I pictured, concrete, red brick housing. I pictured Coronation Street. That's what I picture.
why do we fight a war? Because war is a terrible thing with unbelievable human cost. We fight a war for the collective good of humanity. The collective good of humanity is not an elderly woman born into a hereditary title. It is not some romantic idea of the British Isles. This is the fundamental misconception, which sent 1 million people, needlessly, 1 million Britons, some of whose names are on that plaque over there, throwing their lives needlessly away at some empty metaphysical idea. Another quote from Prince Philip.
As I say, I don't even know if maybe there are, like people talk about patriotism and all that sort of stuff. US people, people in the United States of America are very patriotic. I don't think I've ever heard any of them saying we're going and fighting for President so-and-so or whoever it is. Maybe some of them do, but I can't imagine. I don't know. Maybe that's something that people in the UK do, soldiers, regardless, Defence Force, I don't care which part of the Defence Force. I don't know. I'd be interested to know if there are people from the UK Defence Force or any Defence Force of their country that thinks to themselves, either in New Zealand and Australia and the UK that thinks or has ever thought, I'm going to this conflict zone or this war zone to fight for Queen and country. I've never thought that. I haven't been to lots and lots of deployments with the military or anything like that. But even on the two that I have deployed on, I never once thought, this is for Queen and country, or this is for the country, or for the Prime Minister. Yeah, strange. Anyway, I don't think I'm alone in that. Surely not.
Any bloody fool can lay a wreath at the thingamy, referring to the cenotaph, laying a wreath at the cenotaph. Any bloody fool can do that. The idea that the monarchy and the nation are semi-divine is a con, ladies and gentlemen. Even Prince Philip knows it. To quote Wilfred Owen, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory, the old lie. Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. I am sure this house would not want to once again repeat this lie. Now on to my second point. Queen and country is not just an illusory and insufficient concept. It is also a selfish and pernicious one. In All Quiet on the Western Front, Paul says to an enemy soldier, "But now, for the first time, I see you are a man like me. I thought of your hand grenades, of your bayonet, of your rifle. Now I see your wife and your face. We always see it too late. Why do they never tell us that you are just poor devils like us? That your mothers are just as anxious as ours, and that we have the same fear of death and the same dying and the same agony? Forgive me, comrade. How could you be my enemy?" How could you be my enemy, Madam President? Very simply. Not because we disagree or because we have any incompatible visions which cannot be combined. No, because...
Thought-provoking words, those ones. Was that taken from a... I can't remember where he said it was from. Is that from a book or a movie or both? But yeah, I've heard a lot of people, former soldiers, speak in that way as well. People that have been away, seen a lot of combat themselves. I've reflected on that at times from a personal perspective. I don't there is a conception out there, or a perception, I should say, that soldiers get hardwired into and programmed into dehumanizing enemy before they get there. Maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe that comes about just maybe subtly and maybe overtly through the intelligence briefings that you get, through reports of, acts of terrorism that have taken place and the impacts that has had on actual innocent bystanders or innocent civilians. And that in and of itself can, I think, play a part in causing some, I guess the word that has been used, which I just shared earlier, dehumanizing thoughts to come into mind in regards to preparing oneself to deploy away overseas, to get into essentially looking for trouble. In other words, looking for trouble, but in the context of looking for it, but wanting to have all the odds stacked in your favor so that you can inflict as much damage as you can, and achieve your purpose, like disruption, destroying targets, having a massive impact, a negative one for the enemy that you're facing, etc. But those words that this fellow just read out, those are definitely some reflective, thought-provoking words for anybody, particularly, I would say, soldiers and/or those that are looking, and/or those, not looking to, but preparing for and potentially actively being a part of conflict zones at the moment, which we know there are several of those happening around the world right now.
You, Madam President, were born in Russia. You, Mr. Treasurer, were born in Thailand. The concept of Queen and country breeds hate and intolerance because it dehumanizes our enemies. It tells us that we have a right to kill them because we are doing our duty for our country. It allows us to ignore rational arguments for or against a particular conflict. Why are scores of men content to kill and maim our enemies without knowing the intricacies of a conflict's cause? To spread freedom, democracy, and liberalism? Or
there's a good point there, in terms of the intricacies, like what's behind the scenes, the details. Why are we actually going to war? Well, it's to stop the weapons of mass destruction that Saddam Hussein is going to use. He's proven before in the past that he's capable of doing horrendous things to people. Look at the northern parts of Iraq and the Kurdish people, etc., etc. If he has these weapons of mass destruction and chemical bombs and they paint and frame that picture, it was very easy for people like me, including myself, but people like me to be, I guess you could probably say, drawn into that and go and look at that and go, yeah, I don't want this clown Blinken firing off weapons of mass destruction into these innocent people without actually getting all we get, or we are fed and we receive. This is across the board, not just Defence Force personnel, but everybody out into the interwebs, out into the world. We are fed the information that people want us to receive, that people want us to consume, that people want us to have playing at the forefront of our mind, that tug on the heartstrings. 9/11 there would have been a massive surge in recruitment in the US, I'm sure. I don't know that for certain, but I'm sure that if studies were done and if statistics and analysis was done, they'd probably see a massive spike upwards of recruitment and people enlisting into the US military, and dare I say around the world, like coalition forces. Australia was probably the same, NZ, UK. There was probably a spike. It would be interesting, I think, to see there's probably a spike in that for those reasons, or for some of those reasons. Anyway.
Any other value we consider desirable? No, because they have bought the lie. They have bought the lie that there is such a thing as us and them, and that because they are fighting for their country, the welfare of others is irrelevant. And that's why the idea of Queen and country is so pernicious, because it undermines the only possible justification for something as destructive and violent as armed conflict: the common good. Ladies and gentlemen, by walking out the no door tonight, you are saying that your country will always be right and their country will always be wrong. You are saying it is always right to fight for your country, irrespective of the cause it is fighting for. In 1939, Ronald McCullum, a fellow of Pembroke, was told this by a student who incidentally had voted with the proposition in 1933. This student was about to set off and join the fight against Hitler's Germany. And he said to Mr. McCullum, "I am not going to fight for king and country." And you will notice that no one, not Chamberlain, not Halifax, has asked us to. This is the crux of the argument. Fighting for your country is sometimes justifiable when your country is an actor supporting a cause you believe to be right, such as the fight against Hitler's tyranny. Fighting for your queen and country, because of the intrinsic value of these two concepts, though, is both pointless and, as I have shown, actively harmful. Ladies and gentlemen, there are things worth fighting for. Fight for justice, liberty, and democracy, like Ronald McCullum's student who voted with the proposition in 1933. If you must fight, fight for your friends, fight for your family, fight for the people you love, fight for the person sitting next to you who is just as valuable as any monarch. Fight for your fellow man, whomever he may be, in whatever country, in whatever nation, of whatever faith, creed, or ethnicity. But I beg you, do not fight for queen and country. Do not fight for this construct dedicated simply to disguising our collective humanity. I beg you all to do this motion the justice it deserves and vote with the proposition tonight. Thank you very much.
Oh, interesting. I guess for me, just listening to this for the first time, a lot of what he says makes sense. I think I touched on it at the start, but in very layman's terms. None of the fancy or the panache that he has when he's communicating, and probably not with the same level of clarity. But like I've shared at the start, and I'll probably just repeat myself again, I don't know of anybody personally, including myself, I've never had the thought of, I'm going to fight for queen and country. People might say, oh, that's blasphemy, towards me, those that may have that thought, but that's not why I deployed. That's not why I joined the military, because I had some sense of I need to fight for queen and country. That just never registered anywhere in my brain cell upstairs. And people that I know of and that I served with, and people that I know who have served, have never mentioned that that's why they joined as well. They've had various similar sort of rationales and reasons to mine, similar to mine, some different, but I've not heard any say for queen and country. So at this stage, after the first, this is only the first speaker of these other ones that are to come, my thought at this early stage is one of, I agree with that it's not about fighting for queen and country, and that I suppose what they're saying is the argument being we will not fight for queen and country. Yeah, I mean we will not fight for queen and country. Yeah, I suppose if that's the argument, based on what he said and how he's worded things and what I've shared so far, and my thoughts on that, I'm not deploying on an operation for queen and country. I'm going because that's part of my job and what I signed up for. I'm going based on the intelligence and the information that I'm receiving. And when I go, I'm going with my mates. And so I'm going to do everything I can, and I would fight for them, for the guys next to me in my team. Anyway, that's where I'm at. We'll pause this one here. I'll do the next reaction on the next video, so it's not just all into one marathon 10-hour long reaction.